Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Against the Odds. So last week we had a super epic Against the Odds poll featuring the epic cycle from Saviors of Kamigawa, and in the end it was Eternal Dominion that came out on top. And not only did Eternal Dominion came out on top, it had the most dominating win of any card on the Against the Odds poll ever. There were like 5,000 or 6,000 votes cast, and there are 5 options on the poll, and Eternal Dominion took home almost half of the votes. It had like 47% or something. The next highest option had like 14%. So it was a blowout, which means this week we are heading to Modern to build around maybe the worst card and definitely the most challenging card we've ever tried to build around for Against the Odds. So a quick reminder before we break down Eternal Dominion for Modern. If you enjoy this deck and you enjoy Against the Odds in general, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk Eternal Dominion. And Eternal Dominion itself is basically a 10 mana bribery with a little bit of an upside. It can not only hit creatures, but it can get artifacts, enchantments, or lands as well. So basically any non-planeswalker permanents. The thing is, it has the epic mechanic, which means once we cast it, we can't cast any spells for the rest of the game, but we get a copy of Eternal Dominion on each of our turns. So basically, we get to slightly better bribery every turn, but we can't do anything else. So why is Eternal Dominion so challenging? Well, first off, it's 10 mana, and 10 mana is a lot. It is Worldfire, it is Omniscience mana, it is about as expensive as it gets in Modern. The thing is, when you play a 10 mana spell in Modern, you really want that spell to say, I win the game, and Eternal Dominion doesn't really do that. Not only does it not say you win the game, it actually says you can't win the game in some scenarios, and that's why I'm so nervous, because since we can't play spells anymore, once we cast Eternal Dominion, we can't really do anything except get one of our opponent's cards every turn, and if our opponent has good creatures, that's fine. If we're stealing Ulamogs and Thragtusts and even Tarmogoyfs, we can probably piece together a win. On the other hand, there's decks in Modern like Storm and Ad Nauseam where we're literally getting lands, maybe Simian Spirit Guides, or just not getting much value. So in those matchups, Eternal Dominion is going to have a really hard time winning us the game. So what we got to do to make Eternal Dominion work, and I spent a long time trying to figure this out, is find a way that we can not only stay alive long enough to cast Eternal Dominion, but also long enough to take advantage of Eternal Dominion and hopefully win the game after we cast Eternal Dominion. And I couldn't come up with any super crazy options, so what we're going with is kind of a blue-white enchantment type deck, with the idea being that if we can play things like Ghostly Prison and Sphere of Safety, we can hopefully live long enough to cast our Eternal Dominion, and then after we get Eternal Dominion, hopefully get enough value of getting our opponent's creatures to be able to win with those creatures. So Ghostly Prison, Sphere of Safety, keeps our opponent from beating us down. We also have a bunch of removal. Porphyry Nodes gets rid of a bunch of creatures really slowly. Journey to Nowhere, removal that also pumps up our Sphere of Safety. Detention Sphere can deal with non-creature permanents and a whole bunch of tokens, and then just one Path to Exile, which we don't really want to path too much because if we give our opponent lands, it makes our Ghostly Prisons and Spheres of Safety weaker, but it's nice to have an instant speed removal spell. It's hard not to, just because you never know when you run into some weird Death Shadow pump spell deck, and not having a path is going to be our doom. As far as the rest of the deck, Supreme Verdict is our last removal spell. We splash green for some ramp, which is kind of plan too. So not only do we need to stay alive for a while, 10 mana is so much that we need to have cards to stay alive and also help ramp us into our Eternal Dominion. Because just kind of trying to lock our opponent with Ghostly Prison probably won't buy us enough time. Sooner or later, our opponent's going to draw lands, and they're going to be able to attack us and kill us before we get to 10 mana, which is just so much mana. So Fertile Ground and Overgrowth are pretty much ramp spells that also pump up our sphere of safety, so they're kind of helping us stay alive, benefit from some of our enchantment synergies, and hopefully get us up to the mana we need to cast our Eternal Dominion before we're dead. Ruined Halo, Leyline of Sanctity, and Greater Oromancy are to help us survive spells. So you saw we had a lot of creature stuff. Creature removal, the Ghostly Prisons, the Sphere of Safeties, Ruined Halo, and Leyline of Sanctity in specific are kind of the equivalent of those cards, but for spells. So they prevent burn spells, they prevent the ad nauseum kill with Lightning Storm, they prevent us getting Grape Shot out of the game. So it's kind of a way to make sure we can stay alive in those matchups. Those matchups are still going to be a little challenging because our opponent won't have good things for us to Eternal Dominion for, but hopefully we can piece things together. Leyline also protects our Eternal Dominion from discard, and since Eternal Dominion is so expensive, there's a pretty good chance that our opponent can find a Thoughtseize or Duress or something to get it out of our hand by the time we get to 10 mana. And Greater Oromancy is mostly just to keep our other enchantments alive. We're not really locking with it. It's not like we're stacking them up and giving everything Permashroud. But if our opponent wants to kill our Ruined Halo so they can Grape Shot us to death, they first have to find a way to get rid of Greater Oromancy. Sphinx's Revelation is kind of key to the deck. So this gains us a bunch of life to stay alive. It also just hopefully draws us a bunch of lands into our Eternal Dominion, so we're able to cast it in a reasonable amount of time. So since we have so much ramp, if we get up to like 6, 7, 8 mana and can rev X3, X4, X5, hopefully those cards that we draw and that life that we gain will be enough so we can stabilize, play a couple more mana sources, get our Eternal Dominion down. Mana base, we got some Bant Fetch lands, some Shock lands, some Ghost Quarters to disrupt Tron and so forth, and some basics. As far as the sideboard, since we're blue, we get the 2 Against the Odds All-Stars, Commandeer and Bribery. Then we have more creature stuff, another Sphere, another Supreme Verdict, an additional Path. Rest in Peace for Graveyards, same with Surgical Extraction. I was really worried about Tron and beating that, even with the Ghost Quarters, because our deck is so incredibly slow. Also creature lands, but Surgical gives us the ability to Ghost Quarter a Tron piece and then extract it, which hopefully buys us a lot of time. Stony Silence, Tron, Affinity, etc. A bunch more spell-based stuff. So Story Circle is kind of like a Ruined Halo for a specific color. Another Ruined Halo itself, Leyline, and Negate. So if we run into a deck that doesn't care about our creature removal, we can bring in all this stuff and try to stay alive against Storm, Ad Nauseam, etc. And that is Eternal Dominion for Modern. And that's our Against the Odds deck for this week. So is this going to work? And this is going to be extremely matchup dependent. I think Eternal Dominion is super hard to make work because there's literally no way to make it good in some matchups. No matter how we build our deck, our 10 mana card is not going to be good against Storm and Ad Nauseam and all these combo-y based decks. Against some decks, it's going to be okay. If we have creatures to get, that's basically the idea of the deck, is our opponent's deck has to have something we could use to kill them with, because we don't really have a way to kill them without Eternal Dominion, and that's kind of intentional, because I think if we played a bunch of Frost Titans and Primeval Titans, we're just going to win with those and we'll never see Eternal Dominion. We're either going to win or lose with those because Eternal Dominion is so expensive. So our hope is that we can kill our opponent with the cards from their deck. So we really got to hope that the cards in their deck are good. It's kind of like Shared Fate, where if we could steal good things from our opponent's deck, things are great. On the other hand, if they don't have anything worthwhile for us to play, we're going to have lots of problems. So it's going to be dependent on that as far as matchups. It's also going to depend on if our ways of staying alive are good. We have ways for every deck, but we're definitely going to be better if we run into creature-based decks, where we're playing against Tarmogoyfs and Goblin Guides and so forth, than if we're playing against quick spell-based combo. In those matchups, we just don't have that many answers. We have a few. Our ley lines can be very good, so forth, but we really hope we run into creature decks, and then we might live long enough for Eternal Dominion, and then our Eternal Dominion might be good enough to win the game. And I think that's the kicker. That's the biggest thing with the Eternal Dominion. If you're going to put all this work into living long enough to cast a 10 mana spell, and ramping into a 10-mana spell and build your entire deck around that. It would be really nice if that card just said, you win the game, which is kind of what Omniscience does, kind of what Whirlfire does in most decks, kind of what Ulamog does and Emrakul does. Like, if that's your plan, Eternal Dominion has to be the 10-mana card that's least likely to win you the game after it resolves. And like I said in the very beginning, in some matchups, it's actually a net negative. I can definitely imagine games where we do all this ramping, get to Eternal Dominion, and literally we can't cast it because we're going to die, because our opponent is not going to have things for us to take, and we're still going to die. So cross our fingers, hope that we run into some good matchups, and get to go off with Eternal Dominion, because it's going to be sweet if we do. So hopefully we run into a matchup eventually where we're stealing Emrakuls and Tarmogoyfs and Thaunt-Nazir, so we'll see. Anyway, that's our Against the Odds deck for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you haven't already, take a minute and click that subscribe button. It's a great way to support the channel for free, and you'll find the next video in the playlist right here.